Hi, everybody. This is Lauren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. Welcome to today's episode of the Search Engine Journal show. As we usually discuss things like SEO tactics and SEO strategies, today I really wanted to flip things over to the other side and talk about business models that consultants utilize in the world of SEO and some alternatives which should lead to you getting more return for the valuable time that you spend working on client and partner projects. With me today, I have none other than Roland Frasier, old friend and colleague. Roland, how about you introduce yourself and tell everybody a bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. It's good. It's good to be here. We have hadn't had a chance to get together because we've both been doing so many crazy things. So it's wonderful to see you again, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I started out in my online world with SEO. So I am. It was my favorite thing because back in the days when you could keyword stuff and you could put white text fonts on the bottom of your pages and all those things, and then evolving into private blog networks and all of that stuff. I really like the challenge of the puzzle of complicated things, and I think SEO falls there. And it's also cool because it's always changing. It's cool and it's also frustrating, right? But I really that's kind of what really got me into being involved in the online world. I was always fascinated by that. That kind of led to acquiring sites and seeing if I could kind of expedite the rankings and things like that by acquiring sites that were already in the right places. I ended up acquiring part of a company called Digital Marketer, which I own now with Ryan Dice and Richard Lindner. And we have a big event called Traffic and Conversion Summit. And I've just been, everything from my very first online sales, which was as an Amazon affiliate selling some books at a 4% commission, to to 8- and 9-figure businesses that have their primary drivers online. So it's been a pretty fun journey.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And a lot of what I've seen you sharing and working on and things like that is really getting out of the mindset of the short term, maybe 1 year, 6 month, or whatever, paid for your time spending consulting, and really getting into more of a lifetime return on whether it be equity, royalties, and or performance models. So that's something I really like to talk about today, because I think, and most of the years that I've been involved with SEO, unless it's a site that I'm working on or I've acquired or owned myself, typically what happens sometimes is that time will be spent, and we'll take a site that has issues, bring it back up to the top of Google, right? And then after that time, maybe go into a maintenance phase.
Right.
And then sometimes there's a cutoff. There's a transition. The client may hire an internal SEO. They take over. From time to time, they come back with questions or whatever. But then it sometimes just pretty much stops there.
Yep.
And really, should it stop?
Yeah. And so it depends on who you are and what you want. If you are of an entrepreneurial bent, then I think that it makes sense to think about the possibility of getting something that is more permanent for your time. And you and I were talking, I think, before we went live, and I said my whole thing is don't let your genius be somebody else's retirement, and don't fall into that dollars for hours trap. And there was a conversation that Tony Robbins had a while back when he was creating the Money Master the Game book, and he was talking about with Dean Graziosi, and he said, hey, you and me, we're dancing bears, and we're up on the stage, and as long as we're doing our thing and we can talk and we can present and entertain and educate, we get paid. But the minute that we stop doing that, it stops, and I want to fix that. And so his whole thing there was, he wrote that book Money Master the Game, and it was really around him having partnered with some fund managers to get a bunch of funds under management. And he had figured out if he could get $1 billion under management, then that would be, he'd be kind of set. And I think he ended up getting $4 billion before he sold it. So, that's a good example, I think, of somebody that's making a lot of income, but hasn't really got a lasting asset that they can, that they can fall back on. And so as consultants or agencies, that's something that can be a real challenge. And I learned it practicing law. I practiced law for about a decade and a half. And during that time, I could charge $1,000 an hour, $2,000 an hour, but ultimately there were only so many hours in the year. And, you're going to run out of them. And also from a quality of life standpoint. So when you think about like, how can I really scale me? How can I scale my time? If that's a question that you're asking yourself, it's a good question. And the thing that I found to be most effective is to say, you've got knowledge, skills, experience, and connections that add tremendous value to businesses. And so you have a choice. You can get a short-term income and get a flat fee. You can get paid by the hour. You can even get kind of in the middle, a rev share, where you're saying, hey, as long as I'm doing this, I'm going to get a piece of the pie. But then when that stops, it stops. And so it's still dancing bear, right? You're still having to kind of sing for your supper. And so a way around that is to say, look, the way that I do this is I come in and I'm going to add value to the business. We can figure out how to quantify that a little bit later in the conversation, but conceptually, the value that you bring to the business, if it is in fact ongoing, should be compensated by having some participation in the ongoing profits or equity of the business. And not just that, because the business is an asset. And if you increase the value of the asset, wouldn't it be appropriate and fair for you to participate in a portion of what that asset is going to be valued at, what it's going to be sold at ultimately when, as most businesses do when it sells, right? And so that's really the concept, is how do I get my effort turned into equity?
Got you. And are there any specific things to look out for when, so for example, someone reaches out to me. They have a company that's been around for 5 years, 6 years, or maybe they're a startup and they're about to go into their first funding round. What are some prerequisites that I should look for as a consultant if I want to have if I want to have equity in exchange for the time or the resources that I'm putting in, or a performance model, or what are some of the different models that you look at? And then what should we look out for in terms of identifying those opportunities that you should be able to cash out on maybe years down the road?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's very easy when you start, and, trust me, ask me how I know, because I've made all the mistakes you could possibly make doing this, or at least I think I have, ever so often I surprise myself with a new one. But really, when I first started doing this a long time ago, what I ended up with was I had equity in like 20 businesses and I had no money. And I had no money because I had pieces of the profits of the businesses, and either the businesses didn't make a profit, or the profits were reinvested, which is what happened most of the time, so that there really wasn't anything left to distribute because they were reinvesting in growth, which is another nice entrepreneurial trap that we can get ourselves into. Or rarely, but once in a while, you would get somebody that was like, well, I'm going to give myself a raise, and I hired my uncle, and I had to buy the Tesla, and and they end up kind of fatal subtracting their way into not really having anything for you to participate. So I was doing a lot of work. I didn't have, any income. I had arguably wealth, but that wasn't enough. You've got to have both. And so I'd say the very first thing is be sure that there's cash flow. So you mentioned startups. I generally stay away from startups for this kind of thing. I think for the startup, it's such a wild bet. 90% of first-time entrepreneurs' businesses fail. 65% of all businesses fail. 75% of businesses that are funded by smart people like Silicon Valley type people fail. So I don't really like, let's assume we do as well as the Silicon Valley people and we fail 3 out of 4 times. Well, I don't know about you, but if I am only getting paid for 25% of my effort, I'm feeling pretty bad about that. So I don't like those odds. So I kind of stay away from that. That'd be my first recommendation. I would stay away from businesses that are not already profitable as well. Turnarounds are interesting and challenging, and also completely not necessary for us to work with because there's so many businesses that are making money. So I'd say that like that first thing is let's get rid of all the startups. Let's get rid of all the non-profitable businesses. That leaves us with about 65% of small businesses are profitable according to the stats. And now I'm going to look at where can I have a significant impact? And so I'm going to say, if the lift that I can add to this company is something that I think is going to move the needle for them, then I think it's an appropriate conversation. If it's just, hey, come in and, tweak my canonical structure or something like that, or get me some snippets, that's not terribly, like, that's not a deliverable that's going to be sexy enough, I think, to entice an entrepreneur to say, yeah, I should have you as part of the business. But if you can go in and say, look, you're missing this whole channel right now. And so I've got a comprehensive plan. I can add this value. I see this delivering this right now. You're doing paid media and your AdWords clicks are costing you, $50. And if I go over here, I think I can get you, 1,000 clicks a month. Well, that'd be $50,000 a month or $600,000 a year worth of value. So now we get into how can I quantify that? Let's say it's a $6 million value on the business. Let's just say that you've agreed on that. We'll talk about how to do that later. But if the valuation is 6 million, it's already making profit, and you think you can add 50K a month, that's 600,000, then really you can add effectively 10% to the value of the business. It's more than that because businesses are valued on multiples. But I mean, like right out the bat, you'd say if I was going to buy part of this business and I was going to do it on just the value I'm going to bring, it would be 10%. So it'd be pretty easy for us to talk to an entrepreneur that owned the business and say, look, I'm going to bring you 600. I think I can bring you 600,000 in business. I think I can bring you, this many clicks a month. This is what you're paying for them right now. This is third-party stuff. I'm not making it up. So and we'll find out if I can do that or not. So that entrepreneur might say, well, I'm willing to do that, but I'm only willing to do it if you can, if you actually deliver. And that's a fair thing for him to say. I don't generally offer milestone or KPI based things when I'm talking, to somebody about doing one of these deals, but I do think it's fair for them to ask. And if it's a fair ask, I'll probably say, okay. Right. But from a negotiating standpoint, don't give it if you don't have to. But then now you're in a relationship and you say, look, this is basically like me. If I'm going to bring 600K to the company, and it's a $6 million valuation, it's like me writing a check for 600K. The only difference is mine's going to actually be more valuable because it's going to be ongoing. And so then that conversation is relatively easy to have. And then how do you value that? That's the negotiating point, but that's a very easy, basic way to kind of get into how do I know what to charge? How do I sell the value to the person I'm trying to sell it to? And then how do I measure it?
One thing I've noticed with a lot of the companies that I work with, and I'm glad that you bring up PPC here, is that, after so many years in the world of marketing, I don't consider myself just an SEO, right? But I'm typically brought in to do SEO consulting. I'm the help on that side. And the next thing I know, there's a new brand launching. So I'm looking at opportunities for brand messaging, looking at the product before it comes out, involved with that, this and that. So I like the point that you're bringing up, the initial investment or the return, right, from say cleaning up the PPC or making sure the PPC is scaling or showing the savings there. What is a good way to make sure that that value that someone like myself or members of our audience might be bringing that's also beyond SEO? Because when you talked about like SEO 10 years ago, 15 years ago, was just about ranking. Now it's more so about just building the entity, building the brand, making sure there's news coverage, making sure this is happening, content, not just written content, but video content. Like it's all over the place right now. So what are some ways that you would say, one, to make sure that, hey, I'm not over consulting on that end. And then two, making sure that as we bring in new ideas, new opportunities, suddenly there's an invitation to talk to the board or to talk to the creative department about this. How do we make sure that there's also value attributed to that from a consulting standpoint?
I think a lot of that, and you and I have a good friend who is a mutual friend of ours, Frank Kern, who I think excels at what you're talking about, which is you need to really position yourself right to start with. And so Frank talks a lot about indoctrination, basically positioning yourself, and Dan Kennedy has a thing on it too. And, just like general thinking about what is my brand and what do I want my positioning to be? Because if you come in as an SEO, then they are going to put you in that box. So I think that how you brand and present is really important. And so I'd probably move myself up a rung, because if you think about the way that an organizational structure would typically work in the marketing department, is you have a chief revenue officer or a chief marketing officer. And then under that person, you might have maybe at the highest level, you would have a vice president of SEO, right? Or something like that. But it's going to be a level under the top management, and then a level probably under that. So you'll have a CEO, COO, and then under that, one of those guys is probably going to have, and I say guys, gender neutral, one of those people is going to have somebody reporting to them that is a marketing person, head of all marketing or revenue or demand gen. And then that person is going to have somebody maybe that's doing SEO, whether a contractor or other. How do I move up the food chain in importance? It's going to position yourself as a business strategist, as a marketing strategist, or as a growth strategist, as opposed to an SEO only. The fact that SEO is one of the things that you do is very important, and it might be the main thing that you do. But having even alliances with other people that can provide the other services is a smart way to go, because if you come in as growth, that is something that the company is going to value more than if you come in as a component or subcomponent of growth. So I think that's a really good question. And it's a good place for us to think about, how do we position ourselves? What is the value that we're going to bring? Because if we're bringing all the things that you said, that has to be presented. And I think when you go in, and we just had a guy in one of our companies that was running Facebook and YouTube ads for us. And he saw some opportunities in that business. And he said, listen, I'm more than an ad agency. I would like to help you because I see some opportunities with growth and value ladder and this and that. So try me out as CMO, as a fractional CMO, a chief marketing officer. And so I think like that's a kind of a good positioning, because we did that. And he just started, a month ago. But if he performs like he says he can perform, he has the opportunity to go all the way up, right? And I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it if he can deliver. So I think that I would never have thought of that. He offered that, though, if he hadn't said it. So I think what you're saying is really, really important for everybody that's, watching or listening, is what do I want to present myself as when I come in? Am I going to allow myself to be in a box of SEO or ad or whatever, or do I want to be more strategic? And if you say I'm more strategic, and I say this when I do consulting because I do consulting for equity all the time. And I'll go in, and I typically go in as a business strategist, and I'll say, look, I'm going to do a consult with you. It's a paid consult, and I'll do a 25,000 for 4 hours. That's kind of my thing. Right. And then we'll look at the things, and my goal, I tell them in advance, and this is important for everybody to understand too. You got to tell them, because it's not going to occur to them any more than it would have occurred to me that this guy was more than paid ads. It's not going to occur to them that you're more than whatever you say you are. So when I go in and do my consults, I say, look, my goal is to razzle, dazzle, frazzle you and impress you so much that you're going to say, I need to have this guy as part of my company, because I do these consults not to make consulting money, although consulting money is nice. I do that so, one, I know that you're willing to invest in yourself. Two, I know that you respect what you think I can do enough to pay for that up front. And three, I want to have a short period of time where I can show you that I got a lot to give, and a lot more than what we could possibly do in this short time. And then I want you to know in advance, my ultimate goal is to get equity in companies, right? So I had, Kent Clothier, right?
Yeah.
So Kent's a business partner of mine. I did a consulting for equity to acquire 20% of his companies, and several years ago. And Kent was doing this, and he said, man, I don't get it. And he has people like bring their whole team into his office, and then he works with them for a year, and he charges, I think, $100,000 or $150,000 for that. And he said, "Oh, I do it. They pay that all day long, and they come and they're blown away, but it never leads to anything." And I said, "Well, do you tell them in advance that you're looking to go into this kind of relationship?" And he's like,
Right.
"No, I don't." And I was like, "Well, tell him that." And then I asked him a couple months later, I said, "How's it going?" I just changed everything. He said, it's so simple and so stupid. And I'm so mad at myself, that I didn't think about it, but I wasn't telling them that that was the goal. They didn't think it was even possible. And that might be the case with you and people that are watching too, is this, like, they might think that it's not possible to have you as a partner. That might not occur to them, but they also might just think that you're so far beyond that it's not even an option. So by telling them in advance, that this is an option, by having them put skin in the game, by having them, show that they believe in you and that they're willing to invest in themselves, those 4 things are really key to making this work.
I like a lot of what you said, and just to recap, for multiple reasons. Like, one is that, for example, I'll just use myself as an example. I should not be pigeonholing myself as an SEO consultant if I can bring much more to the table, right?
Correct.
The ability to come in as a digital growth strategist or a digital business growth strategist, whatever it may be. And that positions myself as being something much more than just the Google guy. Hey,
Exactly.
let's see what the Google guy says about that. Let's see what
Yes.
the Google guy says about this. Because, really, like, Google's a shopping engine. Amazon is a shopping engine. You have Walmart Marketplace. You have Shopify setup, everything else, right? That's all intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
So on top of that, building a network, right? A network of colleagues, consultants, people I trust that can come in with me, right? And yes, we can make sure that, hey, the same team that's working on your YouTube is also working on your Facebook and working on your other digital ad management. And we're integrating SEO and content into all of that. So it's not an afterthought of a meeting that happens 3 months down the road, 9 months down the road with the other advertising team that you've hired. We're looking at this from ground one. Hey, right. We're getting organic traffic to this content. Oh, therefore, let's make sure that we remarket them immediately. Let's make sure that we hit them up here. Let's make sure, okay, can we get that lead in? Okay, let's SMS them. Let's do this. Let's do that, right? To bring all of those leads in, to bring it also, it's working together in one conjointed effort from day one, which again is much more than just SEO. That's digital growth across the board. I don't want to say growth hacking because that has such that's had a negative term over the years, but the ability to then position myself and my network or my team or whatever it may be as that digital growth solution, right, to the company, where they've probably, almost every lead that I talk to, they've been burnt by an SEO. They've gone through 3 agencies over the past year. They've done this, they've done that. And we all know that the ability to retain, right, is much more affordable than the ability to either sell or replace. Yes. So therefore, I'm bringing in more value by doing that on my own. And then, on top of that, so you bring up Kent as a good example. Would you mind going through, I know that there's been a number of companies that you've come in, gotten equity with, become part of, grown substantially, and then either exited or they're almost at the point of exit, or there's just been growth across the board. Are there any examples that you can talk about on the show to kind of come in and step by step how that process worked and what the results have been?
Yeah. So I'd say like let's talk about, just to kind of to put a cap on what we were talking about a second ago. I think I have a really good perspective for everybody here because SEO was really where I started my online adventure. And what happened was I got interested in other things. And so I would talk at traffic and conversions at our event, and I would talk about SEO stuff, right? Here's how you rank and all these cool, hacks, as you said, and everything like that. And then I got interested, as I think all of us invariably do, in how can I have more impact and how can I grow other parts of the business? And so I would then start talking about those things. And a friend of mine who is a Pete Vargas, who's a big speaker coach kind of person, told me a few years ago, probably about 5-6 years ago. He said, listen, man, he said, I'd love to help you speak more. I really love all the stuff. You've had impact and everything, but I don't know what to tell people you do. Like you do too much. And so when we're thinking about being growth, we want to be careful not to be overly broad, because it's,
Right.
you really can trip over a million SEOs and a million growth consultants, and, there's no differentiation. So you got to think about what's the differentiating factor you have. Adopting a contrary opinion or position is one, but like you were talking about being the Google guy. Well, being the Google guy is a good brand if you're the Google guy. Being the growth guy, is, and I'm using guy, asexually or agenderly, but if you're the growth person, then what separates you from everybody else is important. And so like, I'd be careful when you're doing this, like if you like SEO and that's your main thing, but you're also good at branding and SMS and, paid media and YouTube and Google and all these other things, you want to think about what's the thing that unifies those. So for me, it was ultimately, I had to pick something, and I didn't want to. I fight kicking and screaming against being put in any box always, right? But you got to give somebody something to figure that this is how I classify this person. Otherwise, they don't know what to do with you. And so then they just ignore you because it's too hard. And so I really had a huge breakthrough in having that conversation with Pete and saying, I've got to pick something. And the thing that you pick can be based on whatever's hot right now. Maybe you're the AI person, right? I'm AI for growth, or I'm AI for demand gen. Well, that's sexy. You got companies paying $310,000 a year for prompt engineers, and they don't even know what the heck a prompt engineer is, because that's just the thing that everybody's like, you've got to have AI. Well, what is that? I need to have a prompt engineer. Okay, let's hire him. How much do we need to pay him? I don't know, 300 grand. I was like, wait, that's crazy. But picking that something is going to be really important to getting to where you want to get. So, I'm talking about it because I experienced it so directly, and I think so closely to what your audience primarily is, that I went from I do SEO to I do marketing to growth to I do business consulting and business strategy. That's really like, I am really focused on business strategy right now. And even in business strategy, I went to acquisitions because that was a place I could differentiate myself. Say growth by acquisition. You can solve any growth problem with an acquisition. Most people think they have to start from scratch or start a new division or start a new product. You don't. Just go acquire it. That people are like, oh my God, I can do that. Wow. So then now I've branded around that. And then having branded around that, I get to go broad again. So, so then I became the acquisitions guy. Then it was like, okay, well, I'll be the acquisitions and exit guy, and then the acquisitions consulting for equity and exit guy. And now I'm going into fundraising, right? So I've basically like had to focus, pick a thing, get in people's heads that he's the Google guy, acquisition guy, whatever, and then start putting content out that was broadening. Does that helpful? I don't know if I'm saying that as effectively as I'd like.
It does. And I'll give you a real life example. So a couple of years ago, Glenn Ledwell invited me to come down and speak at his Flight Club Mastermind, right? And he's like, just talk about everything that's cutting edge with SEO. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I put together this presentation, and it's all about, flipping canonicals and all just like rich snippets and schema markup. And I'm doing this presentation, and I then read the room.
Yeah.
It's over everyone's head. Everyone is lost. There were a couple that were totally into it, but maybe, 3 out of a room of 25, 30 people, right? Small group, small, really intertwined, powerful network. And then afterwards, your friend Mark Anthony Bates comes up to me and he's like, listen, that was an amazing presentation. Everything you said was incredibly smart. The problem was you got to dumb it down.
Yeah.
You got to dumb it down and make it applicable to the crowd, right? Don't put any code up on the presentation screen. Don't do this. Don't do that. Just make it simple and get the point across. You have a room full of business owners, CEOs, a possible CMO, whatever it is. Talk to them. You're not speaking to a room of directors of SEO or developers or whatever it may be. And that was pretty powerful. So thank you, Mark, if you ever end up listening to this. But that was pretty powerful because it really changed the way not only when I'm invited to speak to a non-SEO event, right? Which honestly, I get much better leads from a non-SEO event because it's nice being the only SEO person in the room. But at the same time, it changed the way that I talk to executives in the C-suite, right? The ability to take all of that information that's floating around like Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind, right? And then condense it into a little chart that goes up with the hockey stick. Hey, here's the example hockey stick. Here's the example hockey stick. Yeah. We did this concept hockey stick. It just really changed. It changed everything. So again, it's making sure that you're not only speaking the same language that the folks in front of you do, but it's positioning yourself as being that strategist, as being this, as being that.
And to directly to what you said, and kind of tying back when I was talking about the org chart and who reports to whom, you want to speak to the executives and the owners. You want to speak to those people. So, right. and if they're smart owners, they do not want to be in the weeds, meaning they don't want to know how, they want to know what. And so like those conversations, if you're having a conversation with the super nerdy tech person that's in charge of, IT or whatever, that's not who you want to be talking to. It might be fun. It might be, you might learn something from them and they might totally get all the stuff you're saying, but that's not going to get you in the context of our conversation here about consulting for equity. That's not going to get you what you want because that person is typically not empowered to do that. They're not, unless it's the coder owner, it's not going to happen. You want to talk to the room of people that you were talking to, and you want to speak to them. And a lot of people, I think, misunderstand dumb down too. It is important that you speak to them in a way that they can understand, but they're smart people. And so you want to give smart concepts to smart people who are at the level to grant you the equity that you would like to get, who are not in the weeds, that are not there. Like what you said, if you speak at an SEO convention, you're giving your competition the best way to compete with you.
Yes.
If you speak at a CEO convention, you're speaking to a room full of prospects, right? And that's a big deal. So that like who you're talking to and what you're sharing with them, as opposed to, you don't want to be the industry darling that everybody goes to and learns from and then takes your stuff out and does it and gets paid for it. That's the worst possible thing, right?
Right. You had brought up fractional CMO for a second. So just for our audience, this concept has gotten more and more popular over the past few years. Could you bring up exactly what a fractional CMO does?
So a fractional anything is really, rather than having a full-time person that is a very expensive person in a position, you can go and get somebody who's very, very high quality, but you probably don't need all their time. And so I see it a whole lot in finance with fractional CFOs, chief financial officers, where they're in this is I'll give you finance first, and then let's do marketing, right? So in finance, you typically have a bookkeeper, you typically go up a level to a controller, and then up a level from there to a CFO. And the bookkeeper is a clerk. The controller is kind of a custodian of the clerks and looking at the history of the company and the data. And the CFO is responsible for actually saying, how do we budget and look forward? How do we have relationships with banks? What are we thinking about our financial future in the company? And the CFO is very proactive. The bookkeeper is 100% reactive, and the controller is kind of somewhere in between. So most companies that are, say, under $10 million a year in revenue don't really need a CFO. but they do need somebody that's thinking about those relationships that's going to get them to be a 20, 50, $100 million company. It doesn't really make sense for them to spend 200 or 300,000 to have a really high quality A player CFO, but they do need something more than they've got. So the solution there is, well, what if we had somebody come in for 10% of the time or 20% of the time, and we pay, maybe normally that person would be 300 grand. We're only going to use them 10% of the time. Maybe we pay them 150% of what 10% of their time would normally be. We pay them 45 grand. And now we've got this brilliant person focused on our company 10% of the time. And then we go to marketing. Like, you've got the kind of the worker bees that are doing the implementation of the code changes you want or whatever. Then you've got the people who are focused on particular channels of marketing. And then you've got somebody who is kind of the head of marketing, but all of those people are still kind of in the weeds doing the marketing stuff. Then you need this person who also adds vision and forward thinking and looking for new things and keeping up on things and forming strategic partnerships and stuff like that. And that's typically going to be that higher level person. Now, you might not need that person right now because you've got, Mary's running ads on Facebook and Bob's running ads on YouTube. And, you've brought in Lauren to help with SEO because we know that that's something we should mess with. But that's not but then Lauren comes in and says, hey guys, the person that those other two people are reporting to and the people that brought Lauren is probably either the entrepreneur themselves who doesn't know anything about marketing, or they're somebody who is a marketing person, but they're really not focused on all of the things that they need to be because they're overwhelmed and they're writing copy and doing other things. And so then Lauren comes in and says, yeah, let me help you with the SEO. But here's the deal. And this is the pre-frame that's really critical. I will absolutely come in and I can help you with the SEO. But I want you to know that I'm not coming in to help you with your SEO. That's not my goal. I don't want to be your SEO person. I want to come in and be a strategist for you. And so the way I can do that is, normally you wouldn't be able to afford me. It doesn't make sense to pay me $500,000 a year to be here right now. But what would make sense would be for you to take 10% of my time. So rather than hiring me for $500,000, and this is the start to get your foot in the door, right, for the equity play later. Rather than hiring me for $500,000 or giving me part of the company right now, let me help you with the SEO. But let me do more than that. I'd like to come in and be a fractional CMO for you and help the SEO problem. But I got to tell you, there's a lot of other leaks and there's a lot of other missed opportunities, and I see them and I can help you with them. And now, so you've painted the picture. You are more than SEO. You're not going to be $500,000 to start with. You've also framed very high there. So you're saying, let me come in, maybe you pay me 10% of what I would normally charge, and I spend 10% of my time with you, or our company spends 10% of the time with you. And so it's, it's 50 grand a year just to come in and take a look at this. Now I'm going to come in and blow you away, and I'm going to blow you away with all of the things I do. And I'm going to say, here's the plan. Here's the opportunity I see. And this is what I do in those 25K 4-hour consults, is I'm like, here's all the stuff that should be done here. Now, it hadn't been done, and nobody there knew that it needed to be done. And I don't know who's going to do it because everybody's kind of caught up in the whirlwind of the jobs they've already got. So how about you let me come in and do it? And the way I'll do that is, and then you can make your equity pitch, or you can kind of two-step it and say, let me be a fractional. And then my goal, though, is that as your fractional, you'll see the value that I bring. And as soon as I show you that a couple times, I'm going to tell you that I want some equity in the business, or I won't stay. And that's good to say up front, because if your goal is to get equity and they're saying there's no way you could ever have equity, let me okay, it's not a fit, And I have that conversation several times a month, by the way. And I say, it's probably not a fit right now. And I can't tell you how many times those people come back a month to 6 months to a year or 2 years, even later, and are like, do you think it's still possible? All that stuff that you said that we needed to do, we haven't done any of it. Could you come in and do that? And I'm like, yeah, the way I do it. Remember, it's equity. They're like, yep, no, I know. And then they're ready. So I think you're building pipeline as you are having those conversations as well. But I think the fractional is really cool because you get to come in at a higher level. You get to come in as an outsider. You're not reporting as an employee, and you are positioned for being more than just an SEO, just a paid media person, etc. So I think it's a really great way to step in to the opportunity to have more in the form of equity with a company.
I love that. And another thing too is that coming in at a CMO or that type of level helps you get shit done, right?
It does. Yeah.
Because if you're coming in on the bottom of the totem pole, right, and you have blockers, you have this, you have timelines, this and that, your ability to come in and say, we need to do this, 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 this. Here are the results. Let's get it done right now. Here's the timeline. If this is delayed, that timeline is going to be pushed as well. Yeah. And it's only so long until the holiday season. It's only so long until this. It's only so long until that. Let's get this done immediately. Yeah. And I love the ability, like you said, just to come in and plant the seed.
Yeah.
Right. Plant the seed. So even if it doesn't work out in that first conversation, I get phone calls back all the time. I've had companies that I've worked with for 2 years decide to go in a different direction. And then suddenly I get that, kind of tail between the legs phone call. Yeah, we kind of made the wrong decision. How can we get you back? And then boom, that's the perfect time to
it is
out there. It really is.
Yeah. And even I'm glad you mentioned that, because like that is it for anybody that's here saying, I want to try this out. Why not try it with all of your former clients? Why not reach out to them and say, listen, remember what you did for them. Say, look, just kind of wanted to touch base and see, I know that you guys decided to do this, that, and the other. How are things going? I've got a new thing I'm doing. And you could either pitch the fractional, you could pitch like a half-day consult, which is kind of my thing, or something else. But any of those things could get that conversation going again and get you some kind of quick pipeline wins in doing something like this.
We only have a couple minutes left, but one thing that you had kind of brought up earlier was kind of a quality of life thing. Yep. And talking about Kent, I remember Ken had said something once that struck me. He's like, you don't really have a business until you can leave for 2 weeks and the business is running without you, right? The business is running, everything's going fine. You can actually take a vacation, right? As opposed to the world of small businesses, small business owner, manager, working. You try to get away for a while. You're on the phone half of your vacation. You're stressed out. You're getting up 5 a.m. in the morning.
You have a job.
So, yes, you have a job, right? You're a dancing pony or whatever. So the question is, how does this approach and this mindset lead to a better quality of life?
Yeah. So what it ultimately does is it creates a portfolio of businesses. So ideally, when you're doing this, you are going to come in and you're going to do whatever you're going to do for a period of time. And then at some point, you either are going to replace yourself with that. Like I've got deals that pay me $300,000 and some $1,000 a month, right? So $300,000 a month, I can hire somebody for $20,000 a month, $25,000, $300,000 a year. I can spend 1 month of what I get from a deal to bring somebody in who's a AAA level person, and they can do that, right? You can also sub-partner things out so that you basically say, look, I'm coming in, I'm going to do this. You get your things done. And then maybe you slice a little bit of your equity off for somebody else that's going to do it on a continuing basis. Or you can say, I want, let's say 10% equity to do all these things. And when they're done, I'm vested. And then you're done, right? You're out. So it's kind of, you get to decide if you want to be ongoing or not. You can have a fixed period or milestone based termination date of what you're going to do. Or like most of my deals are ongoing. So I'll basically say, I'm going to come in and I'm going to be a business strategist. It just doesn't take that much time. Because once I get the thing turned in the direction it needs to be turned in, then I don't get that many calls. It's like, it's just because my thing is basically whatever we need to do. You got my phone number. We're partners, right? Just like any business partner. I expect that we'll talk about anything that you need, anything I can help with. Let's execute this plan. Now I've executed the plan. Well, now it's on autopilot. And if we need to hire somebody to do some things, like that's generally something we're going to be making an expense of the company, right? Or I'm going to carve out little bits of my deal and say, I got 20% of this company for doing this. I'm going to give you 5%, you 5%. You guys do all the stuff that needs to be done. And, I'm back in my strategy position again. So that's kind of how it leads to quality of life, because you end up now, I've got 35 holding companies that all have different companies under them. And I don't have to spend much time in any of those unless I want to. I still actually really like this stuff, so I still do work full time, but I don't have to, because they all run. I can take, I can and have, taken 5-6 months off, right? No problem.
Absolutely. So then you get into the mindset of one, setting up a system, right? Not that the same exact system is replicable client by client by client or partner by partner by partner, but
it can be templatized for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you also have your own internal structure on your side, right? Set up as a business structure should be, it helps you step away knowing the colleagues that you have and the partners you have that are trusted and that they're also invested in this. They also have skin in the game. They're going to be performing at the same A+ level that you are. And that's expected of your partners on your client / partner / equity partner side. So
exactly.
Love it all together. Roland, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
The past 45 minutes have flown by. Where can folks find you online?
So I am on the socials everywhere at / Roland Frasier. So YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of the usual suspects. And then if you go to epicnetwork.com, EPIC, epicnetwork.com, that's kind of where all of the things we're talking about here today sit. And so I've got free challenges where you can spend 3 or 5 days with me and it costs you nothing. And we walk through how to do this in a whole lot more detail. And I have a podcast called the Business Lunch Podcast also, with smart people like you on it, which we got to get you on there.
We should. Do you do that virtually like this, or
I do. I didn't until the pandemic. I did it all live, and then I started doing it virtually. And you can get so many more people easily virtually. I do virtually now most of the time. I did a live one yesterday though with Mark Anthony, as a matter of fact.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Tell him hi. And I'm sorry, it's Epic what?
epicnetwork.com.
Great. So I'm dropping these links in for all of you that are currently watching live or watching after the fact on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I've dropped links into first of all Roland's Consulting for Equity Masterclass, Epic Live, and then for folks that want to connect with you on the Instagrams or on LinkedIn, there you go. Roland, It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, have a great weekend, and thanks everybody for tuning in. And thank you for all of our SEJ audience. Have a great day.